When I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a drop popping pockets, swola, 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 swola.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
Swola, 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 swola.
Oh, welcome everybody back again, the Greeks Gridiron. It is February 18th, 2021. It is a Thursday. We have quite a show to talk to you about, some breaking news that just came out maybe about an hour or so before the show began. First things first, before we get things started, though, I did want to address some news that came out a few days ago. It is a little bit old. It came out this past, I believe, Tuesday, but I did still want to go over it and just kind of make mention of it because my show is split up 3 days apart during the week. With that, for those of you that did not know, former Chargers and Buccaneers wide receiver, Vincent Jackson was found dead in his hotel room this past Tuesday, and rather unfortunate news. He's very young, only 38 years old, A really, really tragic thing to have found out, especially being at such a young age. A lot of weird stuff has come out about it, at least from what I read last night. TMZ reported that the sheriff, who is kind of in charge of the whole investigation, Chad Chronister, announced after claiming to have received the autopsy results that unfortunately he suffered from alcoholism. That's a quote directly from him. But there seems to be conflicting reports about that. It seems like even if other officials that he was working with on the case are kind of baffled that he went out ahead and just said, yeah, we got the autopsy report and this is kind of what's going on. The family also made a statement saying that the official autopsy of Vincent Jackson has not actually been completed, and the family won't be getting the full autopsy for another few weeks. So kind of weird what's going on with all that. It's rather unfortunate, and I'm sure stressful for the family for all this to be coming out and being thrown around the way it is. Hopefully that whole mess gets sorted out. But at the end of the day, I really just want to throw out my thoughts and prayers to the Jackson family, any former teammates of his, the Chargers, the Buccaneers. I'm sure that they're all, hurting dearly from this at such a young age. It's such a tragic loss for somebody who's so young. With that, though, I would like to kind of just steer right into the show. We have a lot of things to talk about and get into today. Like I said, some big breaking news came out. Carson Wentz has just been traded to the Indianapolis Colts. The Pittsburgh Steelers GM is non-committal on what's going to be happening with Ben Roethlisberger going into the future of his contract there. So there is a whole lot that we can really get into as far as big news going on and just rumors that need to be addressed. And with that, we'll kind of just start speaking on things first. Before we get into all the trades and things and whatnot, the first thing I want to talk about is the salary cap thing that's going on right now. So for those of you that did not know, the league was projected to have a minimum of about $175 million in salary cap. This was a few weeks ago, this is kind of an assumption that's been going around for a while, but was kind of confirmed a few weeks ago. And now the league today has announced that the minimum is going to be no less than 180. So that's giving teams about an extra $5 million or more in cap room to kind of play around with and work with, which is awesome news for those teams because, a lot of people were expecting the worst and getting very, very low numbers as far as the salary cap was concerned. A lot of players are already feeling the heat because of this. Players are being released. They haven't had contract talks in a while. Some really big names that are probably not going to be back on their teams next year because of it. This has been something that we've mentioned a lot on the show. So with that, a lot of news to talk about, but the salary cap being at about 180 as opposed to 175, $5 million might not seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, at that point, a $5 million contract, that gets you a fairly decent player, somebody that can start on a team, someone who's a role player at, it loosens up the space a little bit because initially the cap room for this year was supposed to be projected around 200 and some odd million. So the fact that rather than being 25 million behind what they were initially expecting when people were making these deals with some of their players, 2 or 3 years ago, because they're, projecting where the cap number is going to be in the next few years going forward, this kind of alleviates some of the pain that they're dealing with now with, players needing to be cut and contracts having to be restructured. So the salary cap changing is massive. The question of the day that I will jump into first now and kind of get this out to you all. With the news that the GM is going to be non-committal with Ben Roethlisberger being on the team next year, Where do you think Ben Roethlisberger is going to end up if he doesn't stay there? And do you think that the Pittsburgh Steelers should keep Ben Roethlisberger or move on? So if you think that he should stay and you think that that's where he belongs, I personally think that at this point, aside from having Dwayne Haskins on the team, the Steelers really don't have anyone to kind of, go after and really work with outside of Big Ben. So him kind of leaving and not being a part of the team, while some people may argue his play has dropped off, I really still feel, at least at this moment in time, he is the best quarterback in that room. So I have a hard time, buying that the Steelers would be better off without him. But with that, if he was to move on, do you think it's the right decision if they were to move past him? For me personally, I just think that it would be a tough sell for Big Ben to go anywhere else right now. It seems like he wants to stay in Pittsburgh and retire a Pittsburgh Steeler. He doesn't really want to go anywhere else. So I would be legitimately shocked if, come to find out in a few weeks from now that the Steelers just decide to outright move on. Roethlisberger's owed a lot of money. He's due $41.25 million this next season. That is a massive, massive cap number, which, I mean, if you're breaking those numbers down, what is it? Like, that's roughly a little under a fifth of the Pittsburgh Steelers salary cap for that 180 or maybe a sixth or so. I'm getting, here we go. A little call. Oh, perfect. Well, this is fantastic. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull this up. Our guest looks like he is arriving here. Funny enough, I just got a little notification for him coming in. I was wondering what happened to my call here. I'm going to pull this up. Give me 1 second, Eli. I'm going to pull you in here. Excellent, excellent. And with all this news that I have to talk about, joining me right now, right on time, I have Eli Bieberman coming on. Welcome back to the show, Eli. How you doing today? Oh, I caught him right in the drink. Are you able to hear me? Uh-oh. Let me see here. Can you hear me, Eli? Uh-oh. How about now? Oh, geez.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear you at all.
That is very weird. Technical difficulties here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to leave the call. I'm going to pull you back in. We're going to restart Zoom here and see if we can get him on here. You got to love the internet, people, and all this technology that doesn't work when it needs to. See if we can't get him pulled up here. It shows that I'm talking into the microphone, so it can definitely hear me on there. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Eli?
Still can't hear you.
No way. It says that I'm... Let me see if I can write in the chat here.
Oh, I fixed it.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. I was going to say, it's saying that my microphone's pulling through. Glad that we could have you, Eli. Super excited to have you on the show. So a lot of big news coming out. I was just kind of ranting on about how Pittsburgh their GM is non-committal with Big Ben being the QB going into the next season here. Obviously, also just announced Carson Wentz has been traded to the Colts. So a lot of big things that we're going to talk about. Kind of flipped everything we had planned on talking about before. But let's just jump right into it. The biggest news of the day, just got finished talking about the salary cap number being raised, the minimum from 175 to 180. It might even be a little bit higher than that, depending on what goes on. But big trade. Wentz is going to Indy for a 2021 third round pick and a conditional 2022 second rounder that can be turned into a first depending on conditions. Thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think if you're Indianapolis, you're ecstatic because if you heard the rumors going around about the Wentz trade to potentially Chicago early in the offseason, it sounded like they were they were on the course for getting multiple first-round picks, like a Matthew Stafford type of haul for Carson Wentz. So if you're Indy, you're ecstatic you got him at the price you got him at, a third-round pick this year and possibly a first, maybe a second next year, depending on what happens with Wentz next year. But bringing Frank Reich and Carson Wentz back together, I think will be definitely beneficial for Carson Wentz. Obviously playing on a better offensive line, better run game. I think they need to add a receiver or two to help Wentz out, but I think it was a really good pickup for Indianapolis, like with a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position with Rivers retiring, and clearly they don't seem committal at all to Jacoby Brissett. So I think it was a really good pickup for them.
I definitely agree with you. So as an Indianapolis fan, I'm not 100% thrilled with Carson Wentz coming because there's so many question marks going on as far as his play goes. But referring back to his stats from that MVP year that he had, 32, pretty much 3,300 yards. He's 4 yards short of 3,300. He had 33 TDs, 7 interceptions. That he led the team to an 11-2 record before going down with an injury, and then obviously the rest is history with Nick Foles kind of leading the way and taking the team off to the Super Bowl there. My hope is that Frank Reich really is the answer for him in terms of just getting back on track, and hopefully he is the actual reason as to why Carson Wentz was so good those few years that he was there. I'm a little bit nervous because there's a lot of conversation about his confidence being shot. I mean, he got benched. It seemed like the Eagles really never believed in him. I mean, as a starting quarterback, you have to sit there and watch the Philadelphia Eagles put up a statue of Nick Foles as like the savior of Philadelphia, getting them into the Super Bowl and ultimately winning it for them against the Patriots. I think it's a great fit. I feel like the system that Frank Reich has, he made and this is not to slight Phillip Rivers at all, but he made Phillip Rivers look a lot better than where he was, considering the decline he was kind of showing in I want to say San Diego so bad, the Los Angeles Chargers. I think he did a really good job with Phillip Rivers this year, and a lot of people were kind of expecting him to come back. Darius Leonard came out and said he was a little bit shocked that they ended up moving on without him and that he decided to retire. So he wants somebody who wants to win, who's a player. And I think Carson Wentz is somebody who's, if his mind is right and he's going to a coaching staff that he's comfortable with, he has Frank Reich there to lean on, I think he's going to be on kind of a revenge tour and have a point to prove. I mean, because the talent is there, the skill is there. I mean, you can't argue the numbers he was putting up when things were going really well for him. And you have to look at the Eagles and kind of think, okay, this is a team that's sort of falling apart. They have a lot going on. They seem to not really know what's going on. I don't really agree with Nick Sirianni being the right choice for head coach for them. That wasn't really that was more surprising to me. And I'm a Colts fan, and he came from Indy, but I just didn't expect Sirianni to be somebody that was in the running for a head coaching position. And I don't know if that's indicative of just how undesirable that job was. So I'm very curious to see how that turns out. But I'm definitely excited to see what Frank Reich does. He has a really quick, short passing scheme that works really well. Obviously, Wentz isn't afraid to take shots downfield. It's just a matter of if he can get his confidence back. But I'm looking forward to seeing where things go. What do you think about the draft compensation that the Colts gave up for him? A third-round pick and a conditional second-rounder the following year that can be a first. You think that was as expected? Because there was rumors that came out last week. It was 2 second-rounders, a third, and a fourth, and then it got changed to this.
Yeah, I think if you're Indy, you're ecstatic at this. If you're Indianapolis, you're not incredibly far off from contention right now. If Carson Wentz comes back in MVP form, you're right in Super Bowl contention. They have a lot of really talented players. That run game is shaping up to be one of the best run games in the league with Jonathan Taylor as he continues to grow and mature. A Taylor Hines 1-2 punch is incredibly scary. You get maybe 1, maybe 2 receivers for Carson. Maybe you pick somebody up in the draft, especially now that they kept held on to their first-round pick this year, didn't have to give it up for their quarterback. Maybe you target at the end of the draft a guy like Rashad Bateman. Maybe Jalen Waddle falls into your lap because of all of his injury concerns and his height and weight concerns. Maybe some guy like that falls into your lap and you luck out, and then you take a receiver, and then you're in a great position. This is a solid defense. They have a solid offensive line. This team is not a team with a lot of holes. So I think giving up a third-round pick this year is not a huge bounty. And then the conditional pick next year, if you hit on this and you do well this season, you could win a division. This is a very winnable division. I think Tennessee is going to be good next year. I think they're going to be right in the thick of things again for that division, especially when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield to just hand it to. But I think Indy is in a very good place right now, and I don't think they gave up too much. If I'm Philly, I'm not happy with what I got back in return. Again, like this is a guy like you saw as an MVP candidate a couple of years ago, and now he's getting benched for a guy that's still that completed like 58% of his last year. Like, I don't know how I'm feeling if I'm Philly. And like you said about Sirianni, like I think he's a really good coach. I like what he did in Indianapolis. I think he could have been a really good candidate a couple of maybe 1, 2, 3 years down the line. He could have been like a really strong candidate coming from Frank Reich's system. But again, like I don't know how desirable that job is. Like everyone and their mother got injured last season for Philly, and you don't know who they're going to be bringing back, who's going to become a cap casualty. You don't know what you're going to do with the 6th pick. They could go 1,000,001 different ways. They have a lot of holes on that team and not a lot of money to do it. And I believe I saw that Wentz's contract had the biggest dead cap of all time on it. So I think it was like $34 million.
Yeah, it's a pretty ridiculous. I have the notes of that somewhere here.
Yeah, I have it as well. I was gonna find it.
If you have it written down, I have it in my notes from a show because I talked about it.
$33.8 million is the dead cap hit, the highest in NFL history. Which is,
and the highest before that was the 22.2 I think that Jared Goff just got for being traded from the Rams over to the Lions. I have to agree with you. I think you hit on a lot of really good points right there. The Eagles, it's funny because as the rumors kept kind of coming out more and more, a lot of people say, you need to take them for just that as rumors. But this kind of reminds me of like the turmoil that the Patriots had with Tom Brady the last few years that he was there, because the more and more things, and obviously this is in a much shorter time frame, but the more and more things are coming out like this, the more and more you have to start to believe, okay, this has to be true in some shape or form. Like things like this can't just keep spinning and spinning and spinning and it not be accurate. And as far as compensation goes, I personally believe that the Eagles set themselves up to get this, and this is kind of their fault, because you can't go and have a quarterback that you're very clearly not convinced is the piece to your team. Then on top of that, you benched him during the season for a rookie who, you can argue one way or another looked good or looked, average at best, depending on how you want to spin that. I think that, for the Eagles to have gone out and been like, oh, we're not receiving any fair offers. I mean, at this point, you kind of got what you got. Like, you basically are laying in the bed you guys made. You can't bench your quarterback and then turn around and be like, we want first round compensation. Look what Matthew Stafford just got for being traded. The Eagles kind of shot themselves in the foot. This honestly makes sense to me. With the way that the Eagles have made Carson Wentz look in value, a second rounder or potentially a first, depending on, compensation and stuff like that and what kind of happens with, I'm assuming this is probably tied to like playing time and if he's actually the starter come next year and things like that. And there's probably some sort of conditions that they've signed off for it. This is kind of as expected. I think that they kind of made the value what it was. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure Carson Wentz had a no trade clause, if I'm not mistaken. So he had the right to approve or deny whether or not he wanted to go somewhere. And I know that the rumors that were spinning where it was between the Bears and the Indianapolis Colts, and it was a matter of the Bears were offering more, but the Colts was Wentz's preferred destination. So with that, you kind of put yourself in a situation where it's like, well, Wentz needs to agree to this, and I bet you the Bears had a first rounder on the table and they weren't able to take it. One, because of the trade clause, and Wentz could have just been like, no, I'm not leaving. And two, he could have, and the Bears aren't necessarily a desirable place. It doesn't sound like they're going to re-sign Allen Robinson either. So, this worked out so far against the Eagles, but they kind of made their own bed with this. And like I said, benching him, showing the entire league you're not convinced he was the guy for your team. You can't really turn around and expect a treasure trove of picks when you don't even, you're very clearly being like, this is not our guy. We don't want him.
Right. No, exactly. And to add to it earlier, it's if Carson Wentz plays 75% of Indy snaps next year, then it turns to a first rounder, or 70% of the snaps and Indy makes the playoffs, then turns into a first rounder.
Okay.
Even still, if at that point they're making the playoffs in 70% of your snaps, the first round pick isn't going to be as hugely beneficial as it normally would. But even still, I can't help feeling like Philly is just going in a complete spiral right now, and Nick Sirianni was kind of just brought in as kind of like a fall guy. You bring in a no-name guy and it failed. It's because we had this no-name coach. You let it tank. They're going to tank for a couple of years and they'll come back, try to bring in like a home run kind of guy. And yeah, but honestly, the biggest loser in this is you hit the nail right in the head is the Chicago Bears. Like the Bears aren't really a great destination. Last year was probably their best chance to bring in a good quarterback. And all they got was Nick Foles, who didn't pan out, obviously. But if you're a quarterback, do you really want to go play in Chicago right now? Like Allen Robinson's probably gone to the highest bidder.
Allen Robinson's about to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I was just going over his stats as I was prepping for the show, and we can kind of tie Allen Robinson into this because he's being brought up and Chicago's in the mix for this. This guy had 102 catches, 1,250 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And he had a career-high 67.3% catch rate. I mean, you're catching 7 out of 10 throws your way. I mean, you can't ask for much better production. And I mean, I know that the Bears have a lot of money tied into their defense. And I understand the whole mantra defense wins championships, but it feels like they have nothing outside of Tariq Cohen now on offense and a subpar offensive line. So yeah, you're definitely agreed. The Bears are kind of the biggest loser here. I feel like a good quarterback for them would have been a good way for them to persuade free agents to come in. But now, Nick Foles isn't the answer, and Carson Wentz isn't coming. I mean, what do you have to lure any receivers in? And you don't even have the money really to be like, yeah, well, we'll throw dollars at you. You don't even have that at this point.
Right. No, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting to watch the quarterback trade market. We've heard a lot of names get mentioned. I've heard Jimmy Garoppolo's name getting thrown around that San Francisco's looking to move on from him. But again, Chicago doesn't really have a lot of assets to trade. You don't really want to give up a first-round pick for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo coming off a 7-touchdown, 5-interception, 1,000 yards in a passing season. A lot of injury concerns there. Other names, I think probably the best name available for Chicago is I've heard Derek Carr's name brought up out of Las Vegas. Rumor has it that John Gruden's not sold on Carr and is potentially looking to move on if he can find something better. So
Mariota's also on there. It's kind of, I think they're in a position where it's. Would you take Carr or Mariota?
I think I'm a little more high on Derek Carr than most people. He's not an elite quarterback by any stretch of the mind, but he's a solid quarterback. He passed for over 4,000 yards with 27 touchdowns and only 9 interceptions last year.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where I look at him too. He's not like an elite level quarterback, but he's definitely a very serviceable starter for you. I think that the way the Raiders are kind of looking at that is a matter of, just based off what I've read, is what they would get for both the quarterbacks. They're definitely listening for Marcus Mariota offers, but they keep him for $10 million next year if he doesn't start. If he does start, that cap number doubles to $20 million. So I would assume they would need to get offered something pretty good for Derek Carr to be willing to let him go, because they'll have to eat dead money for Carr. And on top of that, the amount you're paying Mariota doubles to 20. And that kind of will, and that's where I look at it as that might be like a double-edged sword for the Raiders, because then teams have to take that into account as well. It's okay, if we take Mariota and take on his contract, the incentive is if he's a starter, his cap number doubles to 20. So, and that's not just the Raiders. That's any team that decides to take him. So, that's a really weird situation too, where it's, do you think that the Raiders are going to just dump Derek Carr? That relationship with John Gruden is so weird, because depending on who you're listening to, some people think that they have a good relationship and that it's gotten better over the years, or some people just think that John Gruden outright does not believe in Derek Carr, but there's no better option.
Honestly, couple names I can see in Vegas realistically. With all the rumors swirling around of Watson going to New York, I think Darnold is going to be free. So I think Sam Darnold either ends up in San Francisco, or I think Las Vegas could be a great place for him, because I remember a couple of years ago, Gruden was extremely high on Sam Darnold coming out of USC. So I think that could be a good pairing, maybe add a couple of weapons, like having a guy like Henry Ruggs, having a running back like Josh Jacobs around him, a better system in Las Vegas than he's had pretty much his whole career in New York. So I think that could be a good spot for him. Another name who's probably going to be the most sought-after name in quarterback, depending on what happens with his team, Dak Prescott as a free agent this year. If he doesn't get tagged, which I'm thinking Jerry Jones probably won't. I think he's tagged him a few too many times. I think I think after the injury, I think he's about ready to either like throw a bunch of money at him, throw him a big contract, or just let him go because I think he's ready to be done with the salary cap. But I think Dak Prescott would make a lot of sense in Las Vegas. Like that just jumps them from middling in the AFC West to all of a sudden like you're going to be fighting with the Chiefs like each and every week. Because they have some talent on defense. They have some good young offensive players like Darren Waller is probably the second or third best tight end in the league behind Kittle and Kelce, of course. But they have some talent on that team. Like I think Prescott would be a great place. I've heard Prescott's name mentioned a lot with Chicago. Personally, I don't think he'd want to go to Chicago. I've also heard Washington because Washington, I think, would be, if you're a young quarterback like a Dak Prescott, I think Washington would be absolutely home run place for you to go. You got a guy like Terry McLaurin out there who's probably the most underappreciated wide receiver in the league. The dude is an absolute stud who gets zero help from the rest of his receiving core.
Emerging defense, too, with that front seven.
And Ron Rivera has proven time and time again, like he's a great coach. Like you see how he just completely shifted the culture on its head in Washington and just made them, even in a bad division, made them a contender right off the bat.
Seeing what he did with the Washington football team after being like just exiled, and so if he gets or has he only tagged him once? I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'd be lying, and I should have looked up that number, but I know you can only tag a player 3 times, and he's going to get a lot of money if they tag him again this year. A lot of money. That's all guaranteed money. I mean, at this point, if it feels like they're playing a game of chicken to see if like Dak Prescott's going to undervalue himself or not, and it doesn't seem like it. And this has now been going on for over a year. At this point, you need to, just take a stance. Is he not your quarterback? You're not going to get him for less than what he believes. And at this point, yeah, he got hurt, and you can argue that, but injuries are kind of like a fluke thing. I don't want to say like Dak Prescott's not injury prone, and he was leading the league in yards for a week or two after he got hurt. I mean, and a lot of people argue, oh, well, it's because they were playing from behind. I mean, regardless, he still put up those numbers. If he had put up 5,000 plus yards this year, whether or not they did a great job or not. I mean, and that defense has a lot of problems. That defense let up a lot of points this year. I mean, there's a lot of other things that are wrong. At least when Dak Prescott was there, they were at least a playoff contender. With him not being there, they were. The only reason they were in the mix is because the NFC East was so bad, so that's kind of how I think that's going to go. I mean, it's like, it feels like a game of chicken. I think that ultimately, I might be with you on Dak Prescott ending up as a free agent. On the topic of that, though, what went along with the question of the day that I have, it came out yesterday that the Steelers GM is non-committal, Kevin Colbert, non-committal on Ben Roethlisberger being there. This was reported yesterday. I saw this while I was actually in the self-checkout at Target. He's non-committal on Ben Roethlisberger being there. He's owed $41.25 million on the cap for next season. That's obviously that has to be restructured. Ben Roethlisberger said, I don't care about the money. I just want to play in Pittsburgh. Do you think he needs to, like, he should stay there? A lot of people are saying he should retire, but then you look at it, it's so weird. He put up, 400 and something yards and 4 touchdowns in that playoff game against the Browns, but he also had 4 picks.
Over 500 yards.
Or was it 5? Yeah, it was 500 yards. There's so many 4s in that stat sheet. I think it was like 504 yards. If he's putting up numbers like that, people want to argue, oh, well, he put up so many interceptions and yada, yada, yada. Well, I mean, if you're throwing the ball, I believe it was a record 68 times. Of course you're going to have that many interceptions at that point. I mean, 4 interceptions off of almost 70 throws. That's an interception every 15 throws? Not even. It's like 18 throws. It's 19 throws, something like that. I mean, you can't really point to him and say he threw 4 picks in a playoff game and he's the problem with the team. I mean, he still put up 500 yards and 4 scores. So what do you think? You think that he should stick around in Pittsburgh? Do you think they should move on? Because they really have nobody besides Dwayne Haskins.
Right.
And that's a question mark.
I think if you're Pittsburgh, you want him back next year because there aren't really a whole lot of great options. Like, they're not going to lure Dak Prescott. They neither have the money, and I don't think they'd have any interest in him. After that, the free agent pool is pretty thin because you got guys like Andy Dalton, Mitch Trubisky. After that, fine bridge quarterbacks. If you have a rookie quarterback. Good old Mitch Trubisky. But there's no one really out there in the trade market. if you're Pittsburgh, you don't have a lot of great like options available to you. Like Ben Roethlisberger is by far your best option. What your best play to do is you're probably losing Juju Smith-Schuster this offseason, but
it sounds like he's not going back there. He was just talking yesterday about where he wants to go and play for.
Yeah. So even the way he played last year, like you're not really missing a whole lot. He has not been great. He's been better on TikTok than he has on the field the past couple of years. So Smith-Schuster's gone. James Conner's probably going to be gone too, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. James Conner, after his first year with Le'Veon Bell out, hasn't really been that great. So I think you upgrade at the running back position, maybe in the draft, whether it's a guy like Najee Harris, maybe you get him in the first round, upgrade your running back position. There are a couple of interesting free agent names out there, like Kenyon Drake out of Arizona. I think would be a really good fit for him. He's a great pass catcher as well as a good runner.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be a good fit for Pittsburgh. Then maybe a guy like Chris Carson out of Seattle, who's also a free agent. Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams from Green Bay are both free agents, but I think Aaron Jones is probably going to go back. Jamal Williams may be gone because with A.J. Dillon there, you really don't need him. So I feel like it'd be a waste of money to sign both of them. So I think they're going to go for Aaron Jones to keep Rodgers happy as long as possible. But
yeah,
you just really need to start building around him. Like, especially this year, like you could get a quarterback at like the second round of the draft, maybe like a Kyle Trask type. Maybe somebody falls, maybe a Trey Lance. People don't love him as much as people think, and he falls to the second round. Then you get a guy like him, sit him behind Roethlisberger, and then he's ready after Roethlisberger retires. I think if you're the Steelers GM, you don't really have a whole lot of options. You're kind of handcuffed. You kind of have to talk with Roethlisberger, maybe talk about restructuring his deal, doing something to make sure he comes back to play what we can all assume is his last season.
Yeah, I agree. They got to figure something out. The offensive line is going to be a tough problem for Pittsburgh. Maurkice Pouncey just announced his retirement. The potential of Villanova being gone next year, he's on the free agent list. Pittsburgh's going to have a handful of holes they're going to have to fill if they're not able to. Roethlisberger needs to cut his salary, and when I say cut his salary, if he wants to stay there and it matter, I would say that he needs to take $15 million a year for that year, which is a steep cut from the 41.25 he was supposed to get. But I mean, if he doesn't care about the money like he claims and he wants a ring and he thinks that this is the team for it, you know, if he's freeing up $25-30 million for them in cap space, that would show me that you actually really care. And on top of that, with some of the pieces they're losing on the offensive line, I know that they're getting money back for Maurkice Pouncey retiring, and if Villanova's gone, you know, that kind of opens up some cap space for them because I know Villanova had a fair amount of money in the cap as well. If they can maybe draft, that's the thing is, like you say, draft a running back or draft a quarterback, they're going to need offensive line. I think at least, unless they're going to pick up 2 offensive linemen, but I don't really see you picking up 2 offensive linemen in free agency that are going to replace Villanova and Pouncey, especially Pouncey more so than anything, because he was the literal anchor for that offensive line for, 11 years while he was there. Pittsburgh is in a weird spot. I think that, Roethlisberger, he's going to have to bend over a little bit in terms of the money. I don't think that he's going to be able to make as much as he was expecting. I know he said he would be willing to take money. He doesn't care about it, but I think there's going to come to a realization, especially if the people in charge are saying things like, well, we have to really think about this and make sure it makes sense. It almost sounds like they want to move on. And so my next question to you would be, do you think that they're really considering Dwayne Haskins as the future for the team?
I think if they didn't think he could play, they wouldn't have signed him at all. They wouldn't have even gotten near him. I think Dwayne Haskins has a lot of physical talent. I think it's a really good spot for him because they could unlock him mentally, which I think has been the biggest hurdle. Like you saw maturity issues in Washington. Like obviously the biggest reason he got cut from that team is the incident he had at the very end of the season, going to the club during a pandemic after their second to last game of the season. So I don't think they're sold on, obviously they haven't really gotten him in for workouts yet and haven't seen him in practice, but I don't think they're sold on him as the starter. I personally am not. I like Dwayne Haskins. I think he could be good. I think if he's going to be, I think this is by far the best spot for him, sitting behind a guy like Roethlisberger, or even just having him, Roethlisberger, to text, to ask questions. And I think Tomlin is a really good at getting discipline in his players. Like we saw a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick, who had some off-field concerns coming from Miami. People said he was kind of a head case, and now we see he's become one of the best safeties in the league in Pittsburgh and really anchored their defense. So
Yeah.
really great thing as well. So I think Tomlin's the guy who can do it, but I don't think Haskins is the guy. Maybe you get lucky. Maybe Mac Jones falls to you in the first round and nobody takes it before you. You get a guy like Mac Jones, who I think would be really good in Pittsburgh as well. But other than that, I mean, there's no one.
All right. I think we're back. Let me see if we have this going now. All right. A little bit of an internet connection loss there, but I think we are good to go. Let me just see if I can pull back the conversation. All right. Well, oh, wait. All right. I think we're good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Perfect. We're back. I do not love Xfinity. That's who I have for internet, and that seems to happen every now and again, and it's always at the worst times. But to go back to where we left off, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on Dwayne Haskins. I'm very curious to see how he ends up doing with them. I guess it'll just be a matter of how much he learns sitting behind Ben Roethlisberger, and if Mike Tomlin really is the answer for getting him on the right track. Because Dwayne Haskins was just so talented when he was in college that it would be a shame for him to really turn out to not end up being or not amounting to as much as he was expected to be. But I guess beyond that, thoughts on any other quarterbacks? I know outside of Ben Roethlisberger, that's a question mark. You mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. That's a question mark as well. It sounds like the 49ers are kind of like on the they're like behind the scenes almost exploring quarterback options from what I've heard, because if I'm not mistaken, they only owe Garoppolo like $2 million if they decide to cut or trade him. So if they can kind of do as they wish with Garoppolo, whether they want to keep him or not. Do you think that I just think that they don't really have much. I know that they have what's his name sitting behind him, Josh Rosen. They just signed him and brought him in. I don't know if Rosen's the answer, the journeyman who was supposed to be something coming out of USC when he came into the league. Where do you think the 49ers go with that? I know that Deshaun Watson's obviously on the rumor mill. I'm very curious to see what happens to him, but outside of Deshaun Watson, who else do you think that they could really go after if they're going to get rid of somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of, if you're San Francisco, you're in a really weird position because you probably have the most attractive job for a quarterback. Like, you have some good weapons around him. Like, you have a tight end in George Kittle. Like, you have a healthy stable of running backs. You got Mostert and all those guys. And then you also got some talent at the receiver position. You got a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who they drafted last year. You got a guy like Kendrick Bourne. So they're not without talent. Plus, you got Trent Williams locking down left tackle, who, even though he's a free agent, I can't imagine he's going to go anywhere else. Especially
it would be a big mistake to let him go. They have to. I mean, you traded for him, you got to lock him in for a solid 5-6 years.
No, absolutely. Especially with how much they gave up to get him, and how he played outstanding this year.
Yeah.
Like, they had a lot of issues this year, but it was not Trent Williams. So I think they have a great situation. But of all the quarterbacks, I think Sam Darnold's a realistic option there. If the Jets decide to move on from him, maybe they draft somebody, maybe they go get Watson, whatever they decide to do. I think that would be a great place. I think Shanahan, as we see, like, is always fantastic with quarterbacks. Like, even with guys like CJ Beathard coming in, they still gave them good offensive production for a guy of their caliber. Like, CJ Beathard isn't a guy you just throw on any team and he does well. Like, I think Shanahan's proven that he's a good quarterback coach. Especially, we saw what happened in Atlanta when he brought Matt Ryan to the Super Bowl. Like, so I think that'd be a great situation. It's a very young team too. Like, they still have a stout defense. You got Nick Bosa coming back from injury. You got a really good linebacking core. You got a guy like Fred Warner who's out maybe the best linebacker in the game, probably the most underrated defender in the game. He's just unbelievable. So they got a lot of talent over there in San Francisco. That's a really good situation. Plus, weather never hurts anybody, so everyone would love to go to California. So I think if you're San Francisco, like if you can get a guy like Dak Prescott and unload the Brinks truck for him, I think you absolutely go do that because I think that makes him a contender for years to come. And then maybe like if you get a guy in free agency like that, you can just start loading up in the draft. Maybe grab another receiver for him. Maybe grab an insurance tight end because Kittle has shown he's got some injury concerns. Maybe you grab another offensive lineman. Maybe you bolster that depth. Maybe you grab a secondary. I know Richard Sherman, they're probably going to be losing this offseason. So
yeah, it sounds like he's on the move. I was actually when I was looking through some of the news earlier today, Richard Sherman actually stated himself, it's been made pretty clear that the 49ers plan on moving on from him. He only ended up playing in 5 games last year because of injuries. He did have a pick. I'm actually curious on the topic of Richard Sherman. And when you think of someone like Charles Woodson, who switched from cornerback to safety, Richard Sherman's probably one of the smartest cornerbacks to have played the game in recent years. Yeah, I mean, Stanford grad, he has the IQ and everything. Do you think that he might be better off switching to safety? He was never the fastest corner ever. It was always just, he was smart. He was intuitive. He was a ball hawk. He knew where the play was going. He like what he lacked speed wise, he made up for in his game and in like his film studying and everything like that in his game sense. Do you think that maybe swapping over to something like free safety or even strong safety, because Richard Sherman, he was a part of the Legion of Boom. That whole group could tackle. They could all hit hard. He's somebody that I could see. He could play either safety position and I think be successful. He wouldn't be the hardest hitting strong safety, but he could definitely play the position. But do you think he'd be better off swapping over to maybe a safety position to extend the longevity of his career and maybe even on, maximize the skill set he has left in the remaining years that he has?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's a great question. He definitely has the skills to play free safety. Like we saw, like he led the league in interceptions multiple times. Like he's just an absolute ball hawk. I think free safety could be a good spot for him. The question is, does he want to though? Like I feel like he'd be the type of guy that says, I'm a corner. I'm going to stay a corner until the day I retire. Like Darrelle Revis did, just kind of roll out. He's like last couple of years, Darrelle Revis wasn't Darrelle Revis. So I think we could see something like that, but I think it could be a great move for him. I think he could do really well. And honestly, a team looking for safety, like it's unfortunate. Like we see like the way the league's changing and like everything is speed, like on both sides of the ball. Like especially we see in the linebackers where you see guys like Isaiah Simmons who went to Arizona last year and see a guy in the draft this year, Micah Parsons. Like these are just linebackers that aren't as big as we're used to. Like they're not out of like the Ray Lewis mold or they're just absolutely hulking guys.
Yeah, but the Brian Urlachers.
Exactly. But we see like guys are flying around the field. And you kind of have to, especially when you got teams like the Chiefs where they're basically throwing out a track team at you like every day, and you just have to keep up with their speed, which is exactly how Tampa Bay did a great job. Obviously, the defensive line was dominant, but their next 2 levels, their linebacker play was outstanding. Levante David was a monster in that game. Like he was all over the field. And then you saw their secondary really stepped up too. Guys like Carlton Davis like really stepped up and played well. They were athletic enough. They kept with them most of the game. Like obviously, like you can't stop like guys like Travis Kelce forever, but they did a really good job keeping up with them. So that's the way the league's changing. So a slower guy like Richard Sherman, like maybe unfortunately on the outs, which is a shame because I've always enjoyed watching him play.
Me too. I'm curious what his thoughts are in switching to safety. I don't think anyone's asked him that yet. And I know that a lot of corners are, they have that whole, I'm a corner, I'm not a safety. But for someone like Richard Sherman, who's just so talented and, like he has the football IQ and he plays the game on a deeper level than just athleticism. I would love to see him switch to safety because I'd love to see how far he could extend his career. I feel like he has all the tools and the ability to really excel at safety. And on top of that, I mean, what is he? I believe he's 33 right now. So, I mean, he's already kind of up there for corners as is. I mean, he could play till he was 36, 37, 38. You don't really have to keep up with people. You just have to defend that back end. And I mean, he plays off of watching the quarterback. And so that's his play style. So for him to swap to a position like safety, where that's essentially what you do whenever you're playing single high or like anything like that. I mean, I feel like he would just thrive off the position. I would love to see him switch over to safety, but to like how you mentioned, it does sound like he is going to be gone from San Francisco. For me, I have a hard time like reasoning with where a 33-year-old corner could go, especially someone who's not super fast. I mean, he would be great as a locker room presence anywhere, but like you said, the NFL is evolving to such a speed type of game. I feel like you almost need to, you need to have that like athletic skill set still. And, an aging corner is not necessarily going to be the best fit for a lot of teams here. I really think that he would benefit from a swap to safety, and I'd love to see it happen. The last person I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go here and just kind of get your thoughts on it. So we talked about Allen Robinson a little bit. We talked about Richard Sherman, obviously the Carson Wentz, and the other big name that just got released, Kawan Short from the Carolina Panthers. He spent all 8 years of his career there, and he just got cut loose. Where do you think he's going to go? He was due $19.6 million this year, and they ended up cutting him. They're going to eat $11 million in dead money, and they saved, I believe, $8.6. So a lot of money being taken in. That's going to be split probably about half and half over the next couple of years. But Kawan Short, solid defensive tackle. I don't think he lived up to the first-round pick that he was. I believe he was a first-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was taken in the first. I think he ended up just being a very good defensive tackle. Do you see any holes in any teams that might benefit from pulling him in?
Yeah, so at the stages in his career, like he's still a solid player. Like he's still a plug and play. Like you can throw him on your defensive line and he'll give you some hard snaps. So I think a great place for him would be a place like Buffalo, where their defensive line like wasn't as strong as like we normally see it is. Like obviously, like we hear them in the rumors for J.J. Watt because they could use a pass rusher, but a guy like Kawan Short would be really good up there, just plugging a hole right in the center. Like you have Short coming up the middle, then Watt coming on the outside. Like that's a very, very scary thought, especially with the type of secondary they have with guys like Micah Hyde back there and Jordan Poyer. So I think Buffalo would be a really good spot. I know Cleveland, anytime any defensive lineman is mentioned, they're always looking to add defensive
Cleveland's
linemen.
going all in next year. I think Cleveland really believes that they can win a Super Bowl next year. And I feel like someone like that to just increase the pressure they could already build off of, Cleveland would be a good spot. I agree with Buffalo because they need to added pressure. It seemed like late in the year when they started playing the really good teams, they couldn't get to the quarterback, and that ended up being a problem for them. Cleveland, somewhere I feel like, and like you were just saying, they'll scoop up any D lineman that's worth anything these days. It feels like.
No. And if you're Cleveland, like I know we just talked about Richard Sherman, that would be a really good spot for him because they had struggles in the secondary, and that'd be just a great veteran leadership to help out the young guys like the Greedy Williams they have. Help out the young guys, really like help them develop and grow. And then maybe like bringing in another guy in free agency. There are a couple good names in the draft this year. Like there's J.C. Horn, who I really like. His name's been linked to the Patriots because Stephon Gilmore's names has been dropped in trade rumors. So the Patriots may be looking for another corner in the draft to maybe pair with J.C. Jackson and Jonathan Jones out there. So I think Cleveland, and then one more home. I would probably say Miami would be another good spot for him. I know I picked all AFC teams, but all the good defensive linemen seem to be in the NFC.
I would agree with you on that point.
Like the best defensive line in the league are, let's see, San Francisco, Los Angeles Rams. Then Miami would be a good spot for him. Like, again, like just another big body they could rotate into that rotation. They got some talent over there in Miami. Like, I think they're in a really good position. If Tua comes in next year and develops into the type of quarterback we know he's capable of being, the type of quarterback he was in college where he was just slinging the ball all over and completing anything in sight. I think any talent they can add to. They could probably get Kawan Short on a decent contract because he still got that money he's owed from Carolina. So you can probably get him on a smaller contract. So I think Miami would be another good spot for him.
I definitely agree. Buffalo, I feel, could really benefit if they're a team that's looking to add to the pressure and really push themselves past that AFC Championship game in the playoffs. They definitely need to look into something like that. I feel like Kawan Short could be a good piece for them. They might need to find a premier edge rusher in the draft if anyone falls to them that late into the draft. Obviously, I think they're picking 28 or 29 if I'm not mistaken, or it might even be 30 because they were in the championship games. I don't know the number exactly. But, I mean, they're picking late, so they definitely need to figure out their edge rush. I feel like Buffalo's a very realistic option for them, and this was somebody that, up until this point, wasn't really, rumored to be going anywhere, and then it just kind of came out that, boom, Carolina cut them, or cut him, rather. So, definitely curious as to where he's going to end up going. But that's just about everything I have for you. It's a 1:54. I know you got to head on out of here. I appreciate you joining me for the day. We'll obviously love to have you back on sometime again soon. We'll talk some more stuff as we get closer and closer to free agency, and the real free agency list starts to come out as players get signed and we know the true cap number. Again, I appreciate you coming on, Eli. I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to talk to you again real soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun here. I'd love to come back sometime soon.
Of course. Have a good one, Eli.
Yeah, you as well.
All right. So with that, there's not a whole bunch more news to talk about. Always a pleasure talking to Eli. The kid's so knowledgeable. He knows up and down. He reminds me of myself when I was in high school. Well, he's obviously a little bit older than that. He's third year in college now at this point, but he reminds me of when I was in high school and I, from top to bottom, I knew everything going on in the NFL. And now I'm really starting to get myself back into it, and having somebody to talk to like him is always a really good time. Outside of that, as far as other news goes, there's not really a whole bunch else that I wanted to really pinpoint and talk about. The only other real things to get on, the Jaguars have a few things going on with them right now. They have decided to change their primary colors back to teal. For anyone who follows Jacksonville, they had been running the black uniforms as their primary uniform for a while now. They're looking to kind of rebrand themselves and kind of reset, bringing in Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer, because obviously Trevor Lawrence is the presumed number one pick that they're going after. So they are switching over to the teal colors as their primaries. Want to go back to their 1995 roots and kind of recapture that magic as the new team that came into the league. Because if for those of you that don't remember, Jacksonville was fairly competitive back when David Garrard and Fred Taylor and all those guys were out there. And then speaking on top of the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, sources close to him have just recently given an update and reported that his shoulder surgery that he had on his non-throwing arm, so his left arm, not his right arm, ended up going really well. He's doing great. The doctors are fully expecting him to return right on time for training camp. They expect him to have no limitations. He's already in rehab, getting himself ready to go. So it's exciting to hear that they were talking beforehand that it looked like, the timetable wise, he should be ready for training camp, but the doctors now sound very certain that that is going to be the case. So great news for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You have to hope that, with the global situation being what it was last offseason and now going into this next season, the NFL seems to be planning for more of a normal type of year where they'll have the whole training camp, they'll have the offseason workouts for the rookies, things like that. So Trevor Lawrence being ready will be massive for that team. Obviously, you don't want to have someone like Trevor Lawrence, your number one pick, missing any time due to that surgery or anything like that. So it sounds like he's going to be good to go. Just to recap, as far as the question of the day goes, one of the big things that came out, the Steelers GM, Kevin Colbert, he's non-committal on Ben Roethlisberger being on the team next year. So fire off in the chat below. Do you think that the Steelers should move on from Ben Roethlisberger, or do you think that he is the piece that they should keep for at least another season to see if he can maybe push them into the championship? There's a lot of things going on in Pittsburgh as far as offensive linemen retiring, leaving. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be gone next year, it sounds like. So a lot of moving pieces going to be heading on out of Pittsburgh. They have a lot they need to do to kind of recoup the team. Looks like we just cut out there. Well, internet's giving me a lot of problems. Question of the day, Ben Roethlisberger, do you think he should stay in Pittsburgh? Do you think they should move on from him? I'm going to end the show here before my internet has a heart attack. I appreciate anyone who has watched the show today. If you're watching this post-show, I am sorry for all the technical difficulties we had going through this one. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody. My name is Ethan Hristodoulou. Thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your Thursday.
When I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a drop popping, pocket, swola, 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 swola.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
Swola, 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 swola.